Osman and I am your co-host.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Maryam Taysir and I will be your other co-host.
Our program, Talk with a Professional, every month we bring a different professional, talking to them about their career, their expertise, their experiences, and asking them to give us advice about what they do and to advise the Muslim community and the youth of our Muslim community that are looking for a specific career path or what have you. And this program is sponsored by the virtual and basic learning community at the Islamic Association of Greater Memphis, Masjid Rahman and Masjid Al-Nur. And alhamdulillah, I'm honored to introduce today's guest, Sheikh Yassir Fazaga. Sheikh Yassir was born in Eritrea in Northeast Africa and moved to the United States at the age of 15. He holds a bachelor's degree in Islamic studies from the Institute of Islamic and Arabic Sciences in Fairfax, Virginia, and has a master's in marriage and family counseling from California State University of Long Beach. He has completed his second master's in Middle Eastern Studies at UT Austin, Texas, and is a licensed counselor. He served as the religious leader of the Orange County Islamic Foundation in Mission Viejo, California, and was the director of the mental health department at the Access California Social Services Agency in Anaheim. Due to his unique credentials, Sheikh Fazaga is a rarity in the American Muslim community, and we are honored to have him in Memphis. Sheikh Fazaga currently serves as the counseling and mental health director at Pleasant View School, Memphis Islamic Center, and Masjid Al-Salam. How are you doing today, Sheikh Yassir?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am doing good and thank you for having me, and it's good to be with you.
Alhamdulillah. Well then, to start off, we are going to ask you some rapid fire questions. Okay. And if you're not familiar with it, you kind of just answer what the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Inshallah. So, if you could travel back in time, what period would you go back to and why?
I would want to go back to right after I finished high school. I wasted a couple of years being confused about what I wanted to study. And I was really, really confused. I would start off the semester, take some classes, end up dropping a couple, and then promising myself I'll do better next semester. And then, so there were 2 years after I finished high school that were not spent well. And academically, I would really, this is the time that I would like to make up for. I would regret that. I really regret that period.
Okay, interesting. Dream travel destination?
I've always dreamt of going to India, which I did, alhamdulillah. Australia, I did, alhamdulillah. West Africa is my next place that I would love to visit. I want to visit Senegal. I want to visit Mali. I want to go down. The entire coast of West Africa is just one place that I would love to visit.
Inshallah. Favorite sportsman of all time?
This is going to be, I'm sorry, that's when you start losing your popularity contest. So I am just going to say that I am really happy that I got to witness Ronaldo and Messi playing. So I would have to say just, it was really, I love soccer. So to me, this is these are the best, these are people that I have witnessed as far as admiring people. I've also seen Mike Tyson fight. I wasn't old enough to see Muhammad Ali fight, may Allah bless his soul. But I did see Mike Tyson fight, and incredible. But to me, it's between boxing and soccer. These are the sports that I'm most familiar with.
Okay. Well, then going off of that, what's your favorite soccer team?
Again, just risking losing more popularity right now. I don't really have a favorite team. I have favorite players, and I do like these players. So depending on which league we're talking about, I like Manchester United in England. I like Juventus, of course, in Italy, and then Real Madrid in where are they? Spain.
Okay, well, that's fair. What is your favorite hobby?
Oh, that's a good one. So I love sports specifically and especially. I love to play volleyball. I am a good volleyball player. I take that back. I'm a very good volleyball player. So one day my dream is that we will have a volleyball tournament in Memphis, and the place is going to be at Pleasant View. So anybody out there that thinks that they can take us down, I mean, we would love to hear from you. So, yes.
Okay. What is one thing that annoys you the most?
This is a big one. People making general statements without evidence to support the statement that they just made. I get easily annoyed by these things. And sometimes, people have a tendency to just, if it's your opinion and you're just talking about your opinion, that's fine. But if you're just being absolute in the way that you talk and there is no evidence to back up what you're saying, I really get annoyed by this, really annoyed by this.
Okay. If you were stranded on an island, what two things would you want with you?
That's a really good one. What two things would I really want with me? Oh boy. That's a really interesting question. Um, hmm. I mean, I would want to say one of them is going to be the Holy Book. I would want them to be books if I can. So one of them is going to be the Quran. The other one, the other thing would be, is that like for survival?
I don't know. It's a rapid fire question. What two things
Okay.
come to mind first?
Yeah, I definitely want almost half with me. Second thing is, I don't know, man. I honestly, uh, so every time I travel, I just love to have my lungi with me. So I'm just going to go with my lungi, man. And
Okay.
if you all don't know what a lungi is, I'm just going to leave it at that. So I'm not going to explain a
I'll
lungi.
Google it later. And last rapid fire question is, what is your dream job?
My dream job would be to literally be a full-time student. That would be my dream job. If I can get paid to be a student, just like hopping from one class to another, like getting one degree to another, that would absolutely be my like absolute dream job. That's my dream job.
Okay, mashallah. Um, well, those are our rapid fire questions, and now we're going to move on to our main questions for tonight, inshallah. So, when Osman and I were coming up with questions, and we know, of course, that you're in psychology in that field, but we didn't really know what the difference was between psychology and psychiatry and psychotherapy and whatnot. So could you please give us a really short explanation of what exactly psychology is and how it differs from psychiatry, psychotherapy, and therapy?
All right. So psychology is the study of the psyche. It used to be the study of the soul. That would have been the accurate translation. It's the study of the soul. However, during the period of enlightenment, what happened is that some people felt that the idea of studying the soul was not really scientific and it cannot be quantified. So they changed it into the study of the mind or the study of the brain and its functions. So that would be psychology, and that would be understanding the individual, the way that their brain functions. So that would be studying memory, studying motivation, studying personality, and so on. And then in psychiatry, that is a medical field where your approach to the individual and their brain level functionality is medicinal based. So a psychiatrist is an MD who specialized in the study of psychiatric disorders. So that would be depending on what is going on with the individual. You might end up seeing either a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a psychotherapist. So in my case, I studied neither psychology nor psychiatry. I studied psychotherapy. And psychotherapy is an Islamic invention, al-ilaj al-nafsi. That is like the first people that ever came up with the with this whole notion of psychotherapy, al-ilaj al-nafsi, were actually Muslim Muslim therapists, because believe it or not, in the old days, it used to be believed that if people are going through any mental problems, it was believed that they go through mental problems because of their being possessed by the evil spirits. And some argue that the very first surgery that human beings knew is a process called trephination. So trephination is when people make a hole in the skull in order to make way for the evil spirits to leave out the person. And of course, when Muslims came, that's not something that they believed in. So psychotherapy would be talk therapy, and that is evaluating a person, how they are thinking, and helping them resolve the problems that they may be going through, be it a marital problem, be it an individual problem. So psychotherapists would use psychological principles in order to help their clients heal, versus psychiatrists would look into how well is the person functioning and help them regain back a great deal of their functionality, and then so that they can receive counseling and therapy to do better.
Jazakumullah khairan for your explanation. So Sheikh Yasir, in our communities, we find that we have individuals that have studied the Islamic sciences, and then we find that we have individuals that have studied psychology, psychotherapy, psychiatry. But it seems that you have done something that very few individuals have done, which is combining between the two. Could you explain to us or tell us a little bit about why you decided to study both the Islamic sciences and psychology?
Okay, so there is actually, there is really nothing unique about that, about what I have done. In fact, there are just so many people who have studied what I have studied. But basically, what happened is that I came to the States, and here is me. When I first came here, I did not speak much English. I still don't speak much English. But when I first came, I only knew two words of English: good, good, very good. So that's like all the English that I knew. Then what ended up happening is I started working. I was working at McDonald's. I was the one that was taking your orders. So now what happened is I'm getting them wrong. So then what happened is I started interacting with people, and then I think we ended up like selling pork, and then as a Muslim who really never came in contact with any of these things, I was told that selling pork is haram. I got a job at Winter. I can still say the names, like the hot dog place. I don't think they are in Memphis here. Anyway, so they ended up selling alcohol, and I was saying it's haram, but I had no idea why it's haram. Okay, and so to me, I just became curious. It's like all these people are asking me all kinds of questions, and I had no idea why Islam, what Islam said, or why Islam said what it said. So I said, what I need, if I'm going to be a Muslim, at least I need to find out what it is that I believe in. So I had no intentions of becoming an imam or leading a community. So I finish my schooling, I come back, and I thought that I was going to go back to college and just study something and get a regular job now that I know my deen a little better. Come back and found out that the local community was looking for an imam, and that's where I grew up. And they said, well, why don't you become the imam? And I said, okay, I'll become the imam until you all find a real imam, a real proper imam. And it's like 20 years later, and I'm still there. But interestingly, what happened is while I was the imam, people were coming in with a lot of their concerns. They were coming in with a lot of issues, be it marital issues, having issues with their children, having issues with Islam. And I felt so unbelievably ill-equipped. People come and they trust me, but I was not able to give them anything. All I did was I just listened, and then I literally had nothing to give back to people. So I applied at the program, and alhamdulillah, I got accepted, and that's how I became a psychotherapist. And it has proven to be like, this is one of the, if not the best decision I have made in life. This was one of the most beautiful decisions I've made in my life.
Jazakallah khairan. Well, then most people see psychology and Islamic sciences as two completely separate fields. But based on your experience and understanding of both, how do you see that? How do you see that they complement each other?
Oh, so to me, so remember this, and I think that is part of the problem sometimes is that we believe that there is a dichotomy between secular knowledge and Islamic knowledge, and that's not true. That was never the case before. In fact, in the old days, it used to be that Muslim scholars studied medicine, they studied astronomy, they know about chemistry, they know about math, they know about al-ilaj al-nafsi, psychotherapy. So if you were a Muslim scholar, you had two sources of the truth. And this is what we call al-kitab al-mastur wal-kawn al-manzur, a revelation that you need to contemplate about, and also the creation of Allah, and that you need to reflect upon. So between reflecting his creation and contemplating his revelation, you're always studying about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the one hand, you're using his book. On the other hand, you're using his creation. One of my favorite stories is this guy was reading a book. His friend passes by and said, "What are you reading?" And he said, "I'm reading a book on Tawheed." And he goes, "Oh, what's the title?" And he showed him the book and it said The Cell. It was a biology book, literally on the cell. And the guy referred to it as, "I am studying about Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." And I love that story because people have created this dichotomy. You're either studying secular knowledge or you're studying Islamic knowledge. And to me, it's like, look, it can all be Islamic knowledge. You're either studying the revelation of Allah or you are studying the creation of Allah. So that's point number one. Point number two, I also believe that ignorance breeds fear. People are afraid of, you know what, this idea of psychology, it's all Western based and it contradicts the teachings of Islam. Therefore, it is un-Islamic and you should not be going into that field. And that is not necessarily true. Now, there is a lot of Eurocentrism in the studying of psychology. 80% of psychology produced in the world comes from America. 80% of psychologists in America are in California. So there is a lot of cultural influences in the way that Western psychology has been shaped. Freud, for example, when he studied his clients, were mostly white middle class women who lived in Austria, in Geneva. This is all the clientele that he was exposed to. So everything that he came up with, it was based on that very limited population that he was exposed to. So there is a lot of Eurocentrism in the study of Western psychology as we see it today. So you would have to make that, you'd have to have that ability to distinguish within these psychological principles or these principles of psychology, what would be Islamically acceptable, what is not Islamically acceptable. For example, the way that the brain functions, it doesn't matter. Muslim brain, a non-Muslim brain, male brain, it just does not matter. You're poor, you're rich. The actual mechanism of how your brain functions is going to be the same no matter who you are, no matter where you are. However, there are certain things you would say, look, that contradicts the teachings of Islam. Even though it may be true, but it contradicts the teachings of Islam. So you would have to have the ability to make that distinction and be comfortable to say no. And many of the things that I have been taught as a therapist, I just look, this does not set well with me as a Muslim. Therefore, I learned it, but I'm not going to apply it, nor am I going to believe it.
Jazakumullah khairan for your answer. So, Sheikh Fazaga, since you are a psychotherapist and since you are dealing with the problems of the community, what are some of the biggest challenges, in your opinion, that the American Muslim community is facing, and what are some possible solutions that you would like to offer to us?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that in my opinion, I would say that in my observation. What did I observe based on the people that have come to me? And just to give you an idea of where this observation comes from. So in order to become a licensed therapist, you need to finish your master's degree. And then after finishing the master's degree, you would have to have 3,000 hours of supervised counseling. And then you would have to pass a licensing exam. So when people speak about their observation, I would listen, because they've been exposed to something there. So it really depends on which segment within our population we are talking about. So we say, like, within marital problems, what are the most common issues? Within young people, what are the most common issues? In the elderly community, or men or women. But I can tell you, let's just take people your age, and I'm not going to pick on you guys, but nowadays, people between the ages of 14 and 25, for most men, the most common issues that they go through is anxiety, depression, and how they decide to cope with it. Most commonly would be smoking marijuana. So if I get anybody between the ages of 14 and 25, I have to screen them for when was the last time you smoked marijuana? Because smoking marijuana is now one of the most common coping mechanisms that people employ to deal with anxiety. And the thing about marijuana is it really does work. Marijuana does work, but it only works temporarily. People would, and nowadays what you see is a lot of people argue and they want to make a case for marijuana. Marijuana helps you deal with anxiety. Marijuana is good for your nausea, especially if you are going through chemotherapy or radiation, or you're taking medication for HIV, AIDS. What happens is that these medications, they give you a lot of nausea. They can't really give you medication for nausea, so they would tell you smoking marijuana is going to be good for you. And people, who have tremors, they've got like some neurological problems. They find out that once they smoke marijuana, that settles them down. It helps people sleep. It helps people who have joint pain. And as Muslims, we don't argue this, because in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, when people inquire or ask you about gambling and intoxicants, let it be known, or tell the people, that in gambling and in intoxicants, there is sin, great sin, and some benefit to mankind. However, the sin in them outweighs the benefit that they offer you. So the Quran is open to us acknowledging the good that marijuana is able to extend to people. So as a Muslim, I don't argue that marijuana is absolutely bad. That will be reality proves it wrong. And also the Quran tells us that this is wrong, because there is some good in them. And we're not going to argue that. However, what the Quran does is that the Quran says, yes, they may offer you that good. What happens is they may offer you that good, but the sin in them outweighs the good that they offer you. And of course, the biggest sin in marijuana is that they take away your freedom. Like every kind of addiction, you lose a sense of who you really are. So all kinds of intoxicants, that would be it. So for people around that age, it will be marijuana, it will be pornography, and other poor coping mechanisms that they would employ. Usually with people who are married, you got a lot of communication issues, you got a lot of cultural gaps that are going on, you've got a lot of these types of things. Again, for women, depending on the age group, since we're talking about the 14 to 25, we're talking again a lot about coping mechanism and the way that people do this. And unfortunately, you screen these young girls. Again, you screen them for the same thing. You would screen them for pornography and marijuana at a lesser extent. But you also want to see if self-harm is part of the coping mechanisms that these young people, these young girls employ. And I apologize if what I am saying is triggering to any of our viewers out there. So if you need to practice self-care, please do so. But that was just a long way of answering your question, that within the Muslim community, we are not necessarily different from the overall community that is out there.
Thank you. So you spend the majority of your day, well, at least we assume so, listening to and trying to help people solve their problems, how do you prevent other people's problems becoming your own and affecting you? And what kind of a toll does your job take on your mental health and spiritual well-being?
Um, and here is the thing. As clinicians, you've been trained to practice what we call self-care. You must be able to practice self-care. See, it will be very wrong on my part to assume people's problems or people's challenges and make them my own. That would be wrong. I will not be of much help to them. Neither would me being a companion in suffering make their suffering less. So you would have to really be able to disengage. And I don't say that to be cold, but in order to help the people best, you would have to have that ability. And the way that we do this is people think that, you know what, oh, I'm being burdened when people come in and share their issues with me. This is such a beautiful job. I mean, like best the best reward, the best compliment that you ever get as a therapist is just knowing that people trust you. And to me, that's like the biggest, man. The idea of just listening to people and how much trust they put in you is so self-rewarding. To me, it is just incredible. And I have so much appreciation, admiration for the courage and that sense of humbleness that my clients display every time they talk to me, because it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of humility to come and say, I've got problems, I am unable to solve them on my own, I need help. And that takes courage. So it is not just me helping them, but every time I speak to people, I am just learning about them, I'm learning about myself. I'm constantly admiring them, and I'm just constantly impressed by every single client that ever came to me. So in the process, I appreciate their resilience. Like I said, I appreciate their courage. I appreciate their humility. I also appreciate their patience. I appreciate their ability in putting a smile on their face despite the type of challenges that they're going through. And to me, it just human beings are incredible, subhanallah. And to me, every person who brings that story to me is just a hero. Mashallah, tabarakallah. So I don't view it as a burden, but rather, being a clinician, you would have to practice self-care.
You mentioned some of the things, or yeah, at least one of the things that you seem to really enjoy and appreciate about your profession. Could you mention to us some of the struggles or difficulties that a Muslim would face from their community and from external factors if they go down your career path? Like, for example, in our Muslim community, we know that certain mental health issues are taboo and what have you. So, like, as this is a program for people that are interested and possibly becoming a psychotherapist, psychologist, what are some struggles that they might expect to experience or face?
Um, okay. Experience what in their faith or just generally speaking?
No, like from their community, maybe, or like at university, and whatever, whatever.
Well, one thing is, so if you are talking about becoming a therapist, then I think that the biggest challenge that you may face is burnout, especially if you started too young. So let's say if Maryam were to come to me and tells me that I want to be a therapist, first thing that I'll ask is, how old are you? Let's say somebody comes and says, oh, I'm 23, I'm 24. I say, you know what, you're too young. I'm not saying that to downplay, what the person wants, but most people come into this career as almost a second career. These are people who would study something, they go and they teach at the university, they become nurses, they study this, they study that, they work, they gain a lot of life experience, and then they come back, and now this becomes a second career to them. And remember, the more you bring into the client as far as experience and maturity, and these are, we don't hold these things against, we don't hold them against young people. They just have not lived in the world long enough. But let's say somebody started studying psychotherapy as soon as they finished their psychology degree, they went on and they wanted to be a psychologist or a psychotherapist by the age of 26. Well, you start doing this by 40, you are spent, like you're burned out. And that's not good, because by 40, you're still very, very young. So one thing is burned out. That is going to be a big, huge, challenge. Another challenge also is, because you like a topic, you want to study, and you want to become a therapist because your friends told you that, oh my God, you're such a good listener, and that's how most people become interested in this. I would also speak about your own readiness to be, because in therapy you get to see a lot of the issues that maybe you went through in your life, but you never had the courage to address before. So now all of the sudden, as you're studying this, oh my God, I'm becoming a client myself. And that's why, for example, we are encouraged as therapists to seek our own therapy. Part of the hours that we can actually accrue, part of the 3,000 hours, would also be hours that we spend in personal counseling for ourselves. And I think that would be important. Um, of course, there are also other cultural issues. When you are working with a community that is multicultural, your own cultural competency is really, really important, because in order to serve the client that you are serving best, that saying, if you speak, so if you are able, if somebody speaks to you, if you speak to somebody in a language that they understand, you go to their head. If you speak to them in a language that they know, you go to their heart. So you've got to have the ability to go both to their head as well as to their heart. And by language, I'm not talking just about the ability to speak English. I'm also talking about the cultural language that is unverbalized. Like you just get it. That's just part of the culture. And that just, that is important.
Jazakallah khairan. So just to gain a little more insight on in what you do, can you describe for us what a typical day in your life looks like?
Alrighty. So let's take maybe, okay. So that would be, can I give you an example of either today or yesterday, just as an example?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's do Thursday. So this last Thursday, I had an appointment at 9, at 10, at 11, at 1, and then I taught a class, and then I had phone calls in between, and then I had to do the talk in the evening. Friday yesterday, I had a client at 7:15, and then I had a client at 8, and then I had a client at 11, and then I gave a khutbah. This morning I had a client at 7, and then I had a client at 9, and then I had a conference at 12, and then I had a seminar at 2, and then I watched the game, Barcelona Real Madrid game, at 3. I only was able to catch the second half, and then now I am here. So I would say an average of 5 to 7 clients a day, and phone calls in addition to phone calls. So that would be what my typical day looks like. However, ideally, I would love to spend most of my day in preventative care rather than helping people with already existing problems. So rather than me talking to 3 people about why they should stop taking or smoking marijuana, I would love to speak to a high school about why they should not start smoking marijuana. Because prevention is actually the best approach rather than having to deal with this later on. And inshallah, hopefully, that is the direction that we like to head towards. And that is a lot of preventative work.
You mentioned preventative work, and you also mentioned, like, for example, speaking at a high school to prevent youth from engaging in certain negative behaviors or actions. Do you have any plans with regards to the Memphis Muslim community, and more specifically, the youth of the Memphis Muslim community? And if so, could you please enlighten us?
Sure. So for somebody like you, and hopefully like Maryam, and I don't mean to embarrass you all, but I do have a class on before you say I do. And that would be for young people who just finished school, they just started working, they're thinking of the next step for them, and that is they want to get married. Well, I believe that a premarital class is going to be of great benefit to people who are looking into getting married, equipping people with the proper ways and the proper tools, for example, to talk about, what do I need to look for in a spouse? What kind of questions do I need to be asking? What kind of issues do I anticipate? How do I find Mr. Right? How do I avoid Miss Wrong? And what happens if I did end up with Miss Wrong or Miss Right? So this would be a really fantastic class to teach, for example, for people who are, about to graduate from university and then move on. High schoolers, which is something that we're doing already at PVS for people who are juniors and seniors. I taught last semester a class on Islam and psychology, and I'm teaching this semester a class on Islam and sexuality. And, we want next semester, inshallah, I'll be teaching a class on life skills. Okay. I was talking, COVID came in, but my hope was that for the seniors, I had a class on how to purchase a car, for example. What do you look for in purchasing a car? I know I don't look it, but I actually did engine overhauling, and I love to work on cars. Just given these kids like good skills. These are skills that people need to have. Don't just admire the car because it looks great. Well, let's see, how do you check out a car? See if a car is runs great or does not. To me, these are like beautiful skills. And remember, the more people become aware of these skills, it has a nice impact on their sense of self. It boosts their confidence because now they feel that they can do these things uh, the right way. We have classes for newlyweds. We have classes for people who have already been married for some time. So to me, it's like prevention, creating a safe atmosphere, almost talking about things that people are afraid to talk about, and just be able to address that. This last Friday at where was it? Rahman, for example, we had our khutbah about depression and mental illness because of what took place in Texas. And usually the story is always the same. You finish the khutbah, somebody pulls you on the side, and then they say, I know what, I really appreciate the khutbah. I just have a question for you. My husband, my wife, my child, they're taking Prozac. Is that okay? Should I take my loved one to see a therapist or a psychiatrist? I think that I am depressed. We think that we have. So what happens is that when you come and you address these issues publicly, you give validation to the people who are facing these challenges. And the minute people feel validated, they're no longer stigmatized, they're not ashamed, they're not isolated, and they are more likely to seek help from you. So these would be some of the ideas that I have, inshallah.
Thank you so much. I wish I could take your classes. I might have to stop by PVS next semester, inshallah.
All right, you got it.
I think you actually just touched on the question that I have next, but of course, like mental health topics are a taboo topic in our community. So what can we do as a community to get more families to start talking about mental health and destigmatize it?
4 things. Number 1, we just said it, destigmatize it. Okay. There is a stigma about mental health, and that is usually a mark that is used to shame a person, that pushes them into isolation, or somehow because of that stigma, somebody is deemed superior and somebody else is deemed inferior. Okay. And the reason is with mental health, it is seen as a sign of weakness. See, if you're diabetic, if I ask anybody here diabetic, we've got some kunafa going on, and people say, no, 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 man, my sugar is too high. We've got like some good lamb shank. No, 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 you know what? Cholesterol is too high. I've got high blood pressure, the triple deadly diseases that we just love in our community: diabetes, high cholesterol, and high blood pressure. Okay. Nobody's ashamed of saying that. People will just, say, can I get some water? I need to take my pill. Nobody, nobody says that. Besides, if I were to say, anybody here taking Prozac? Anybody here is on Lexapro? Anybody here is like medicines that people who have anxiety or depression take? Nobody raises their hands because in our society, we have taught people that some illnesses are okay to mention out, publicly, and other illnesses you ought to be ashamed of and not to mention them out publicly. So we need to stop the stigma regarding this. This kind of conversation out in the open is one way of destigmatizing mental illness. Number two, we also have got to be able to support the people who are going through mental health related problems and their loved ones. Give you a quick example, something that we did in our masjid I'm so proud of. In the month of April, we changed all the lights in our masjid to blue. And people just came in and said, what happened? Why are all the lights blue? Well, I am glad you asked because April is Autism Awareness Month. Let me tell you about what autism is. So for an entire month, the lights in our masjids were blue and people would just walk in and every time we would tell them about autism. So now imagine that you are a parent and you have a child with autism. Now coming to this masjid, the masjid made such a big statement by making sure that all their lights are blue. That is testimonial of you're welcome. We know autism and you are welcome with your child in this place. That is very telling. So the point here is that to give support and to also support those who are going through these issues and also support for their families. Number three is also to educate the people about mental illness. Remember, ignorance breeds fear. Ignorance breeds fear. And one thing I love about the Quran is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ولا تؤتوا السفهاء أموالكم التي جعل الله لكم القيامة وارزقوهم فيها واكسوهم وقولوا لهم قولا معروفا. This is the verse in Surah An-Nisa, I think it's verse number 5, where Allah speaks about sufaha, people who are feeble-minded. Allah said that they may not be able to carry a financial transaction, but then Allah said, feed them, clothe them, and speak to them with kind words. Feed them and clothe them means that they are living amongst you, means that you take care of their physical needs. But then also Allah said, speak to them with splendid, kind words. And that is that emotional care that the community shows to people. There is this guy, he wrote a book about the Majnoon in medieval Islamic culture. His name is Michael something. I'm sorry, I forgot the name. But in it, he refers to this verse. And he said that this verse has changed. It was such a cardinal event in the neuroethics. And that is a field because of the changing information, rapidly changing information that we have about the brain and the way that it functions. Ethical issues come up as a result of this. So now the Quran says, look, part of these basic ethical issues is that these people are not to be ostracized. They're not to be driven out of the community under the premise that they are possessed with evil spirits. But rather, Quran says they live amongst you. You feed them, you clothe them, and you speak to them with splendid words. And then finally, so the stigma, the education, the support, and then policies. We've got to be able to support and promote policies and activities that help the people who are going through mental health challenges as well as their loved ones. Because you want them to be at that level, it is so important that you look into these policies and say, look, I want policies that will help children with autism. I lived in, when I was in Texas, what they wanted to do is that they wanted to prevent the scores in a specific, area, and from going low. So what they did is that they had placed all supposedly special needs children in one school, and they literally sacrificed that school. They said, okay, so this can be the school with the lowest grade, and that's fine, but we don't want to spread these kids out so that the ranking of the school does not go down. Well, that meant that some of the parents had to drive 30 miles one way to drop off their kids with special needs in that school, and then 30 miles back. And that was just too taxing. It's like, but there is a local school there. There is a local school here that could have accommodated my kids, but now it was just a bad policy. It was not inability that they could not accommodate the kids. They just said it was a policy. So we want to make sure that we promote policies that actually help these individuals who can really benefit from a change in policy.
Thank you so much for your answer. The last question that we have, inshallah ta'ala, and then we will ask user we will ask questions from the viewers, is what general advice do you have for Muslim youth who are seeking a career, just in general? Like, what would be your advice to people that are pursuing their career or want to pursue a career?
I mean, I would say point out the obvious. Do well in school. And if you have already developed a passion about a specific topic, about a specific subject, pursue that. One thing that you've got to really love, and I say this as an immigrant, look at me, just really caused Osman to be bored to death. He's just ready to crash down right now, man. Just like yawning in front of me like that, man. Okay, I'm just picking on you. He had a long day. So what happens is, if you do know what it is that you're passionate about, it would be best to actually pursue that in terms of the amount of knowledge that you develop, that you acquire about that specific field. I've got some of my clients, I admire them so much, man. These are kids who say, look, I really want to be a doctor. So what have you been doing? Since the 10th grade, I have been volunteering at the local nursing home or hospital. I have been shadowing a doctor. I'm working on my EMT certification. I am doing this. It's like, this is the person who's really passionate about what they want to be. And that is really, really nice. I love English. I love literature. I love, I want to be an English professor, and I just love reading. I turn off the TV, and all day long, books are my best friends. I'm always reading. People who are competing about how many books have you read? How many books have you read this year? Or people who just generally speaking, like, I want to be in sports medicine. You know what? Right now, I am pursuing this. And that is really nice. If you really like it, and if you know what it is that you want to study, I would say pursue that. Sometimes we may not really be aware of what it is that we want to study. I'll just say explore. And that's the nice thing about, general ed requirements. The whole idea is just so that you explore before you say, I really like this. Visit local, your counseling, career counseling at school. Please visit them. Sometimes you would be amazed. Just go there. They have these tests for you, and you take them. This guy said, I went there and I took a test, and they told me that the best job that I can get that suits my personality best would be to be a mortician. And I thought that was really funny. So now what happens is, but you can go to these career counselors and seek their advice, and they would ask you all the proper right questions in helping you, picking a career.
Thank you so much. We only have one question from the audience, which is perfect because, we're about to run out of time for tonight. It's kind of related to the question that you just answered, but what advice would you give to young people who want to pursue a career in mental health/counseling?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, mental health is a really, really beautiful field. And I absolutely love what I do. I would say two things. You've got to know your deen. You really, really have got to know your deen. You've got to know your boundaries. You have to find out what it is that you're comfortable with, what it is that you're not comfortable with. And because this field is really based on observation, and in this sense, like I said, it is very Eurocentric field. So what you want to do is that you just constantly you want to question. The idea is because the professor said it, that does not mean that it's true. And I'm not saying that you challenge your professor or you challenge the teacher, but I'm saying that you challenge the information, especially when the information is an opinion and is not solid scientifically based, type of evidence. You've got to be able to say these things. And I can tell you that, as Muslims, we have these principles in psychology that would just make it easy for us. It's like, I'm listening to this. I can make a distinction. I can discern between this and that. So I would say mental health is a beautiful field. There is absolutely a need for more people in the field. Make sure that you acquire as many language skills as possible, because of what I said earlier. The more languages you know, the more people you are able to help, especially minorities who do not have access to resources because of language, linguistical, cultural, ethnic, or religious barriers. So you become that person that people can come to, and I think that's just a beautiful thing to do. So I'd say if that's what you want to do, then I would say, like I said, get to know your deen and pursue that, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much for your time. Honestly, I benefited so much. I learned a lot. I might even consider a career path in psychology now. But
Okay, well, make sure you talk to me so that I can talk you out of it, inshallah.
okay, got it. Inshallah. But thank you so much for joining us today. And we really appreciate the time that you've dedicated for us tonight. And thank you to our audience members for joining us and asking questions. Inshallah, please stay tuned for next month's guest speaker. And we hope everyone has a good rest of the night. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.